Hello, everybody. You are here on episode 5 of Ramp Live here on BeLive.tv. Very exciting time we're going to have for the next hour. We have Don Grierson with us, and Don out in the Hollywood Hills, originally a disc jockey in Australia. Don Grierson, a legendary internationally acclaimed A&R executive, has worked with many of the most notable artists in modern music history. As a promotion person for Capitol Records, he was involved with the Beatles and the launch of Apple Records, receiving the only Golden Apple Award ever given by the Beatles. Don also worked in international marketing and advertising for Capitol. He then became a founding member and VP A&R for EMI America Records, signing and working with such acts as Sheena Easton, Kim Carnes, Kate Bush, Sir Cliff Richard, Jay Giles Band, and Kenny Rogers. This was followed by a very successful period as VP head of A&R at Capitol, where he signed and or helped guide a number of hit-making artists, including Hart, Tina Turner, Joe Cocker, Anne Murray, Steve Vai, Megadeth, The Motels, Bob Seger, Duran Duran, Thomas Dolby, Billy Squier, and others. Later, he became Senior VP Head of A&R at Sony Epic Records in New York, signing and working with such acts as Celine Dion, Cheap Trick, Bad English, Gloria Estefan, Cyndi Lauper, The Jacksons, and Living Color. Don later became co-owner, co-president of Drive Entertainment, an independent catalog-oriented label, and now currently operates his own music industry consulting company. He is a music supervisor for independent films, as well as an executive producer A&R. Don is on the advisory boards of Music Biz Pro India, ArtistIntersect.com, is a voting member of the Grammys, an instructor at Musicians Institute, Hollywood, California, and very interesting, we'll definitely be delving into this, co-author with Dan Kimball of the published book, It All Begins with the Music. Don, welcome to the show.
Thank you. My pleasure.
This is very exciting. Now, we go back a little ways. We've been talking on, this is the first live talk that we've had. And I've gotten to know you a little bit through our talks on Zoom. And this is our first video broadcast. Very exciting.
Yeah, everything new.
Everything new. There's always something new, right?
In this day and age, absolutely. Absolutely.
And it seems like the rate of change is increasing, would you say?
Change is part of our business. I mean, if you look at history, change has always affected history, but in our music world, we've gone from vinyl, to 8-track for a short period of time, fortunately not very long, to cassette, to CD. Now we don't look at sales in the old traditional sense about what sold because it was a hit. We look at streaming, and that's where the real business is moving to. And then you've got YouTube, which is very powerful because everybody watches music. And you have diverse ways of hearing and finding music that we never had before, which is a dramatic change in our business. You don't have to go to listen to a radio station to hear the new songs. And then if you hear something and you like it, you go down to a retail store, which is the only way you could buy it. None of that applies anymore. Most kids have no idea what a physical piece of product is. And don't care, and primarily don't care. What is interesting in the mix of that is that it's not big business, but it's a nice little tasty piece, which is growing on a yearly basis, and that is vinyl, going back to physical product, which you have to buy in a store. That's a tasty little business. You're not going to get rich doing vinyl, but it is a part of our business is actually growing. There's some research that I read recently that 28% of the people who buy vinyl don't have a turntable.
They just love having...
They love to collect. They're the real fans, and they love to collect, and that they can't play the vinyl at home, So this, yes, change is part of our daily life,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We're here talking to Don Grierson. I would urge you all to share this broadcast, and if you can make comments, you can certainly do that and ask Don questions as the show goes on. We're going to be here for a whole hour, so this is really exciting. A lot of really cool things to talk about. We will also be putting this on Facebook after the fact, after the hour, and then it will also go on YouTube. So there are opportunities to watch this show in replay. And Don, you're in Hollywood, and that's quite the area for what you're doing, working at the Musicians Institute. Recently having released, I'm actually not sure what year It All Begins with the Music was released, but there's a lot of incredible information in this book where you were able to impart your knowledge into book form for people.
Well, I think the book is a little different in the sense that it's not a traditional book. What we tried to do is approach our business from a broad perspective and talk to as many people as we could and interview them for several reasons. One, some of those people have moved on, they're not in exactly the same positions today, but the positions are still there as part of our business. So when you're talking to somebody that's an A&R person, that's the person at a label who seeks the talent, works with the talent, gets the music together with the talent to deliver it to the other departments of a company. So, A&R people move, some don't survive, some move up, move on. But the philosophy of A&R is consistent, although it does change like everything does. So we tried to, I think we did it well. I interviewed Dan, my writing partner, who's also a teacher at MI. He's written 3 other books. That's Dan. He's written 3 other books about the music industry. And he's a very, very good writer, does a lot of writing. So he did most of the pulling all of the pieces together and kind of making it flow. I did most of the interviews. I interviewed all kinds of people, primarily to find out, 2 things: what they do and what that job is, the responsibilities that go with that job, but also how do they get there? Because in any career, you start someplace and you end up another place. If you're successful, it doesn't mean you end up exactly where you want to end up, but nobody can just walk in and take over a record company or be head of A&R. There's a journey. So when we talk to songwriters or publishers or attorneys or managers or A&R people, anybody, we kind of wanted to get a feel of how they found their place in our business. And now that they're in a position of responsibility, what that job actually entails. So that was the approach we took to the book, as against writing a typical music. Somebody said in the beginning, they said, you should write a book. You've done A&R, I said, yeah, but I was not a guy that was hanging out at the party scene every night and getting stoned out of my brain. I didn't have all the sex, drugs, and rock and roll stories. I was, to be honest, I was too busy working.
You were, yeah, and it's very evident throughout knowing of your career how you have really been extremely passionate about what you do and always in the learning mode. And you've really started from very humble beginnings, and how each of the positions that you had, the tenacity and the focus that you had in that led to meetings with people that really moved your career along to where it is today. So I feel that it's really to your credit. And I think in addition to that, when you read quotes from people like the Wilson sisters from Heart and other people about how there's a level of genuineness and like you being a great guy to really help people. And I think that's been evident. That's a thread that's run throughout what you've done over the course of your career.
Well, I never took it for granted. When I first started my journey, the last thing I ever thought of, I didn't know what the business was anyway, that I would end up, doing some of the things that I've done and working with some of the people, specifically the artists. But I've always been a fan, and I always, as a kid, when I started to get interested, I'm not a musician, I'm not a performer, I'm not a songwriter, I'm not a producer. I was a fan, and I always, wondered, a little bit about where they came from, what they did, but I didn't understand any of that in the beginning. but I never assumed that once my journey did start that, you know, it was just going to go there and everything would be, you know, neat and tidy and you'll be famous. You know, I always believed that, you know, I had to work hard. I loved working hard. That was the great part of it. But I had to work. I couldn't assume any day that I would walk in and they'd say, hey, you know, you're doing a great job, mate, but you're fired. You know, you can't live in that world. So I just always gave my 110%, you know. A couple of times, fortunately only a couple of times along the way, you know, the door closed. They politicians and, you know, the upstairs executives, you know, moved and then they brought in their own people. So a couple of times I got, you know, saying thanks, but goodbye. That comes with the territory. You know, we're in a creative business. It's not a formula business. It's the creative side of our business is there are no rules really. So, you know, you're going on personality has a lot to do with it, how you relate to people, especially with artists. Artists are unique. You know, some of them will drive you crazy, to be honest. But they live in a different world. They're creative and they don't think from the business side most of the time what goes into it. So when you're working with an artist, your job is to relate to them, respect them, or you shouldn't be working with them, and in turn, kind of help them see some things that they may not be aware of. And some artists handle that very well, others don't, and it comes with the territory. But you can never take anything for granted. So you just do everything you possibly can to do your job as well as you can and make it right. My job has never been to be on stage. My job has always been to, in some way, help the artist get what they want, and that is to be successful. And if you do your job and they get successful, you've done your job well. I've always respected that, you know. I've never wanted to be on the stage and get the applause, you know, but I'd love to see my artists that I've worked with stand up there and the world's going, we love you. I go, yes, man, you know, that's a thrill in itself. So I've never taken anything for granted.
Right. It's funny because when I was, and we want to thank Rodney for tuning in. Good afternoon to you, Rodney. Where are you watching from, Rodney? You know, it's funny, Don, when I was coming up with the photo album, there aren't a ton of pictures of you with the people that you were working with. It's before the day of the cell phone in some cases, perhaps. But what I did find, I found some pretty interesting. I'm gonna show this picture, and I have to be, in all honesty, I didn't know who Jerry Moss was. These two gentlemen, I didn't know who they were at the time. That's how naive I am about certain.
That is Herb Alpert. But
it is.
The gentleman sitting down, that's Gary Owens, a legendary radio disc jockey.
Yes, not Jerry Moss. I'm sorry, I'm confused.
Jerry and Herb Alpert was the A, and Jerry Moss was the M in A&M Records. And Herb was you know, very successful. Herb Alpert and the Tijuana Brass were very, very, very successful. And Gary introduced me to Jerry Moss, who helped me get my first job in promotion. And that's me smiling my face off because I'm out there with one of the hottest artists in the world, with one of the best disc jockeys in the world. You know, I mean, are you kidding me? How does that happen?
How does that happen, Don? How does that happen?
No, you can't plan it. You can't plan it.
Yeah. Rodney's from Iowa. Wonderful. And Steve, thanks for tuning in, buddy. Appreciate it. You were with us the last broadcast. You know, you can't. And I think that it's similar in some ways, in probably a lot of ways, Don, to being an artist themselves. You work hard. You realize it's a people business. So you focus on that. And then you don't quite know how things are going to happen or when they're going to happen, but I think you put yourself in situations that could be conducive to great things happening for you.
I mean, art is something that nobody can define exactly. You know, we like what we like, dislike what we dislike. That's why not every song is a hit for everybody, you know. Not every artist is a hit for everybody. But the joy is watching something kind of start from scratch and find its way through the maze of the business side of our business, and eventually being heard and loved by an audience, and they respond by, in this day and age, streaming and viewing, you know, and some downloading and some physical sales, of course. Sorry about that.
No problem.
But, as I said earlier, there are no rules. So an artist has a passion, has a talent, but there's no rules about how they become successful. There's no rules. And, being part of that, you have to live outside the box most of the time and bring your business acumen in to the artist so that they understand it is a business as well as it is music. It just doesn't happen.
Right.
An artist just doesn't become successful. There's a lot of people become involved in putting all of those pieces together. Outside there's the management of an artist, which is, crucial most of the time. And then you've got a label. Then you've got varying people with varying responsibilities at a label. And when it all comes together, it's pretty amazing. I had the great joy when I moved to New York and went to work for Epic, not intimately working directly with Michael Jackson, but I was there not for Thriller, but I was there for Bad. And Bad was like, crazy time. And what happened watching a company go to work, Michael didn't come to me as the A&R person. He delivered the music. And we said, thank you, Michael. Watching the company and all of the pieces and all of the planning going into it to making it work. It's more than anybody can imagine. The detail that goes into it, the coordination. It's fascinating. And when it turns out to be successful, like it obviously it was with Michael, it's like there's nothing like it. There's nothing like it.
Mm-hmm. And you had mentioned to me the last time we spoke about, Jim. Hey, thanks, buddy. Jim here in Fort Collins, Colorado. Appreciate you tuning in. About when Michael was recording Bad, you were basically there when they were listening to it for the first time.
Well, as the head of the department, I was head of A&R.
You were.
The music comes into the A&R department and then it goes to the rest of the company. So and I'd never seen this from a superstar because I was not with anybody anywhere near as big as Michael when I was at Capitol. All of a sudden one day, and it was in those days when he got test pressings, which were acetates, and these were the first pressings that after Michael had approved it and Quincy had approved it, this is what the company got to hear. This is the new Michael Jackson album. Well, I got test pressings of Michael's album before basically anybody else. And I'm going, are you kidding me, man? I'm listening to the brand new Michael Jackson album. This is pretty cool. It's pretty cool. It is. And those are the moments that you go, wow.
Absolutely. Yeah. Here's another wow moment I want to show you.
One of the great ladies, one of the truly, truly great ladies, and of course, great artist.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That was a magical time because Tina had been around a long time, obviously. She had the up and down career with Ike. And there were some really tough times during that period. She had been, after she broke up, they didn't work together anymore creatively. She signed did a bunch of different albums for different labels. Nothing really worked because it was kind of like all over the place. No disrespect to Tina. But when I moved from EMI America back to Capitol, Tina had been signed, not by me, had been signed, and they had recorded an album which was in the can, as we say, which means it's been recording, but nobody thought it was right to release. So nothing was happening. And I knew her manager, who was Australian, Roger Davies, and Roger called me, and I'd only been there, a few weeks. And he said, hey, I want to come in and talk about Tina. I've got some things I want to talk to you about. I said, please come on in. I knew who Tina was. I had not met her at that time. And I had no vision of Tina Turner because I was trying to get myself organized with my staff and looking at the roster and all of the things that you do as an executive. So Roger comes in and says, I know Tina signed and nobody knows what to do with her. But this is a really good manager, by the way. He's one of the great managers. He said, I've done some research and I believe in my artist very strongly. And he said, I'd like you to give me a budget. And I want to go to England, where I've already spoken to some key people there. And I've talked to all of the key people in Europe at Capitol EMI, which was our major company, worldwide company. And they all said, well, Tina, she's great, but we need a great record. If we get a great record, we'll support it. So he said, I want to go to England and record 3 singles, 3 tracks. with a production company in England called Heaven 17, who are much bigger in England than they were in America. And he said, they're really excited, and I want you to give me a budget, which was very realistic, and let me go to England and record these 3 songs with Heaven 17. And if we get a song that really gets everybody excited, I've got the Europeans behind me. They'll run it. And we said, well, it's a better idea than anything I've got in the back of my mind. Go, So he goes to England with Tina, and they record a cover that turned out to be a smash called Let's Stay Together. Let's Get Together. And the Europeans freaked, and they did dance mixes, which was very important even in those days in Europe. And all of a sudden we had a smash single. And the clubs in America all the cool clubs were starting to play this song by Tina. And, here we are, the label in America, we didn't have anything. Releasing a single in those days, because we didn't have streaming, it was all physical. It was not a financial thing to do. The money was in albums. So we're sitting there with a hit single, and we go, oh my God, we got to get an album together. So for like 3 months, Roger in particular, a guy called Carter who worked for me in the A&R department, who had actually signed Tina, and I was involved to some degree. We put together an album that became Private Dancer. And the first single from the actual album was, What's Love Got to Do With It? And it broke open and became a worldwide #1. And basically, as the old expression goes, the rest is history. She was a great artist, live, unbelievably live, became a superstar. And Roger cleaned up. She had a kind of a bit of a dated band. He cleaned all of that up. He changed the staging, and he just modernized everything. And all of a sudden we had this lady who was one of the great visual artists as well, with this whole new music philosophy and band and everything. And it turned out that album sold multi-million albums around the world. And watching that happen and being a small part of it was, again, it's one of those great joys, seeing something start basically from scratch, because nobody was waiting for Tina. And then all of a sudden she became like a #1 artist around the world. That's magical.
Really is. We're having a great time.
By the way, I just want to interrupt. She did everything for everybody. She was loved. In Europe, she could have run for president of Germany because she was an amazing superstar in Germany. She could have been president of that country or whatever the top position is, because she was so revered there, around the world, and here too. Just an amazing lady and a unique talent.
That's fantastic.
But again, takes people to put the pieces together. Manager was absolutely crucial in that scenario, but the company did all of the things that they need to do and should do on a worldwide basis. And then you had, everything came together. Everybody was on the same page. Boom, smash.
Really interesting. We're having a great time here talking to Don Grierson. Don is at his Hollywood home there, and we are doing the first live BeLive.tv show. And it's funny, we could easily have the show go 5 hours, and I would but I asked for an hour for you, and so we're going to do an hour. So we have a little over a half hour left with Don. I want to thank the people that are tuning in, Lisa, Jim, Steve, Rodney, and others that are going to be watching this when it's repeated and put on to Facebook as well as YouTube. I do want to mention Don has a website, dongrierson.com. Also, the book, which is It All Begins with the Music. And there's a lot of interesting things in that book. And, when I started delving into that book, which I'm still trying to process, there's a lot in there for me to take in. There's a lot in there. Realizing how many pieces, Don, need to fit together to make this all happen. And we talk about it beginning with the music, and something you and I have talked about in discussion before is about having great songs. And something that's really admirable, and I think you would agree, this goes back to your passion when you first started out in living near the bush area of Australia.
Living in the bush.
It was in the bush.
In the,
You want to make that clear.
there were more kangaroos than there were people.
um, yeah, so must have been a hopping place. I had to say that.
No,
So
it was not.
yes,
Well, if we want to look at the kangaroo aspect,
that's
yeah.
right, the kangaroo aspect. You you had an early passion for music, even in a way that you couldn't quite understand, and your friends thought you were a little bit nuts as far as how far you took your passion with that. Um, what I find so interesting is how you make a comment in the book about how you started, you know, being in positions where you were, that was your job, a very um, very visible position in these companies where you, the different ones that you worked for, where you were actually finding songs for artists that needed kind of an injection of excitement and great songs into their repertoire so that they could continue these great careers that they had started. And I find that really interesting. You kind of had, you mentioned that you're not a musician yourself, but having a really great ear and being able to listen and say, I think this is the song that you need. And at times the bands being hesitant because they were so used to performing their own songs. But we don't care as an audience who writes a song. You mentioned to me, Elton John never wrote his own song. Like people, they're not going to love Elton John less because he didn't write his own songs.
No, I mean, I believe that. I mean, the public, they don't really know what goes on in the music business, how things come together. They hear something, they see an artist and they go, oh, I love that artist. They don't know what goes on behind the scenes, how long that artist has struggled or whatever the scenario was to get them to that point. They just listen. They don't, and nor should they really worry about it. They don't know whether it's recorded on 2-track or 202 tracks in a big studio or in a home studio, on a computer, as it can be done today. That's not what they do. They want to be stimulated. They want to be affected by a performance. And the great history tells you that the great artists sing great songs, and it works. The public is open. We don't always agree on the same song, of course not. But and you have to keep in mind, some artists do not write. Tina Turner did not write.
Mm-hmm.
Joe Cocker did not write. Celine Dion did not write songs. So they needed another aspect of a company and a person or a department to find those pieces. They sometimes, it's an interesting dichotomy because you're coming from a position of some power, yes. And if you're doing your job well, you're trying to do it right for them, for the artist, first and foremost, and then for your company that you're working for, because the company's in business. It is a music business. And so it's a fine line. When you talk to Celine Dion or somebody that does not write, then they are going to be getting songs from all sources. And usually it comes down to a few people who make the decisions which songs to actually be presented to Celine in this particular case. And she would say, I love that song, I don't like those songs, whatever. And you would come to an agreement which songs you'll go into the studio with. And there are times, and it's not only myself that's been through this, many other A&R people have been through it, where you find a song and the artist doesn't feel it. And that's a fine line, because if you force a song on an artist and they hate it, they're going to hate you, and they're going to hate having to deal with that song if it's a hit for the rest of their life. So it's a very, very fine line. But artists are very, and I don't mean this in any derogatory way, they're very self-centered. They're very self-focused. And so they should be. So they don't sometimes see the bigger picture. And our job is to look at the artist and where we're starting from and look at the bigger picture, because our job is to help that artist get where they want to be, which is to a big audience, and be successful. So there are those times when you have a song and you go, I totally believe in this song, I don't like it. And then, you can go through, I call it the fisticuffs, I've got a few bruises. Excuse me, in the end, the artist, no matter how hard you battle, and you never do that unless you're 100% sure that you're right, and you're not always right, of course. In the end, the artist has to make the final decision, because if they're being told what to do, that's not right, not for a real artist. So, you know, sometimes you lose the battle, and many occasions, you know, found songs that have worked. If the artist writes, then it's a different set of challenges, because they don't want to do anybody else's song because they write. But then sometimes what they give you is their best songs. You go, I'm not sure. I don't, you know, and you're coming again, hopefully, if you're honest, you're coming from the position that if they were just going in the studio and recording your songs, then let's go in the studio and record songs. Our job is to say, we've got to find an audience, and we've got to, that's where you want to be, in front of that audience. The company needs you to be out there because they're going to make money, and then we can stay in business. So it's such a fine line. And it's an interesting battle sometimes, you know.
It really is. You know, one of the bands that's closest to your heart, no pun intended, is the band Heart. You've been very close to the Wilson sisters for some time, and they're very a lot of gratitude toward you for what you were able to do for them.
Yes. I know I certainly had a lot of influence with them. That was based upon when I found out they were free. They were on Epic before that. They had some big hits, you know, Magic Man and Barracuda and songs like that. And then, as often happens with acts that have been around a while, the newer songs are not quite as good as the older songs. And that had happened at Epic, and they were dropped, and they were available. Now, I've always had, and this goes back to my ears when I was a kid, I've always had a thing for voices, you know, whether it be the Beach Boys harmonies, Bee Gees harmonies, or just a voice. Like when I signed Joe Cocker, it was like, there is nobody else like Joe Cocker in the world, whether he's going to be successful again or not. But you've got an original. And when you've got an original, you've got something to work with. Heart had, of course, the two sisters. And Anne's got one of those amazing gifts of a voice that's, to this day, I saw her about a year ago here in town singing at the Forum. And, you know, she sounds as good as she ever did. She had a gift. And then sister Nancy is an amazing guitar player and sings really good too. And they do the harmony thing. But you had the image. Everything was there. And the band was a great band. You know, the boys behind them were great. My argument to them was, well, it wasn't an argument. My sales to them was, I think you can be successful again. Well, of course, we want to be, we can be. Well, but I think we have to have a discussion about what kind of songs you sing. Oh, we're writing. Good, great. Don't stop writing, because you never know where that next song is going to come from. And I said, well, that's great. Would you be willing to co-write with, you know, professional songwriters? They said, yeah, you know, selectively, yes, we'd absolutely do that. And I said, would you be open to a song that you didn't write at all, have a piece of, if it was a song that was great for you and it was better than something we had? That was an interesting conversation. But we did get to the point where, yes, but it was a grudgingly yes. Well, I did, not behind their back, but I put them together with some really good co-writers. And one of those songs became the song Never, which was a big top 10 single for them off that first album on Capitol. The rest of the songs didn't hold up. And their songs, to be honest, as the band, the guys in the band said to me one day, we were on the road, I think we were in New Orleans, and I was watching them. The band said, you know what, man, we made a great half album. The half album had the hits and the other song. But you know, this is what you're dealing with artists, you know. You've got intense egos, and they're very proud. And so what happened in that process, without belaboring the point, is that they were writing and co-writing. And I was saying to key songwriters and publishers, I'm looking very, very, very selectively for a couple of songs for Heart. You know, any good ideas? I'm not looking for formula. I'm looking for something that Ann Wilson could kill. So I got songs from every source, you know. And I didn't tell the girls that I was doing that openly every day. They knew I was probably doing it, but I got a song that I fell in love with. It came out of Canada. And I played it for them, and they said, yeah, you know, and got it. and that was the first single, What About Love. Ron Nevison, who was a new producer I brought in, and that worked out great, fortunately. He found a song, I'd like to say I did, but no, he did it, called a song called These Dreams, which was written by Bernie Taupin, who is Elton John's lyricist, and a guy called Martin Page. And that became a #1 single. We found another song from local writers called What About, Nothing at All, a song called If Looks Could Kill, and Never, which was their co-write. And we had 5 singles. We had 1 #1, 4 top 10, and a top 30 single from that album. And they only co-wrote one of the songs. That did not sit well with them, except they loved the fact that they were selling out 15,000 seaters again, you know. And it was MTV time. Everything was big, you know, the hairs, the production, the videos, everything. They've mentioned it, and I totally understand it, you know, that era, they appreciate that somebody cared enough to help them get to that next level again, but they didn't like a lot of the stuff that went into it. That was part of the business they had to deal with, you know. And after the second album had a #1 song called All I Want to Do Is Make Love to You, which was a Mutt Lange song, who's a major legendary songwriter producer, and a couple of top 10 singles. And after that, not much has happened to them from a singles point of view, but they still tour, although I believe Nancy and Ann are going separate ways for a while now, but without getting into that. Right. But, you know, I saw them here at the Forum, as I said, 9 months ago with Cheap Trick and Joan Jett. And they were killer. They were rock and roller, man. I was proud of them, you know. So this is all what goes in. Each artist is different. There's somebody, Jim Muller says, what great artists have written their own songs? Wow, you could go down the list. The better question might be which great artists haven't written all their own songs, you know? And there's a list of those. Yeah. In rock and roll, more so than ever, most artists write their own material. Or sometimes they do co-write with really good songwriters. And we expect that today. To find an artist who's just a great singer and then have to go out and search for songs, it's not as easy as it used to be. Publishing companies are set up differently, but it can be done, you know. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times when you see in today's charts, you see, you know, written by 4 or 5, 6 songwriters. That's a new kind of exception. Now you just put up Diane Warren. Diane has had so many hits, it's kind of scary. And primarily in most of her life, never has liked co-write and has done very little co-writing. So most of the hits she's had, and I had a couple of really big songs with her, she co-wrote by herself. She wrote by herself. So, you know, there's no one answer, you know. I mean, you mentioned Elton. Elton, I've had this like a little test to students, and people said, you like Elton? Yeah, man, I love Elton. He's great. I said, you like his lyrics? He's a great lyricist, isn't he? Oh, man, I love his lyrics. Elton doesn't write a lyric. Bernie Taupin does. Elton writes those amazing melodies and has the voice and all that good stuff that goes with it. The public don't care. They don't care that Elton didn't write those lyrics. You know, the public didn't care that Hart didn't write What About Love, you know, or Tina Turner sang What's Love Got to Do with It? They don't care. It was like, ding, oh, I love that song. When it goes here to the heart, boom, everybody's happy.
We're having a great time here with Don Grierson on BeLive.tv. I'm hearing some, not sure what that noise is. A hammer?
Oh, you're in the back. Yeah, I got a guy replacing a door.
Okay, cool. We can certainly work through that. We are, you know, it's really fascinating. And I think that the fact that there are all of these elements that go into being a professional musician, you know, and I come from a place where I work primarily with youth musicians, and it's very easy, Don. It's humorous actually to me to think about your typical, you know, you can have some guys in a high school rock band just think they're going to take the world by storm and they're going to become famous and they're going to become rock and roll stars. And it's really an education. It's a lifelong education. So I think what's really cool is that you are able to work with individuals that are kind of coming up. And at the Musicians Institute, here's a great picture of some of the students out there.
Oh yeah.
Tell us about the Musicians Institute.
It's been around a long time. It used to be known as the Guitar Institute. And then a gentleman from Japan, Mr. Shibuya, bought it and has expanded it in many directions. He's got fashion, he's got makeup and all that as well. They're all under the banner of Musicians Institute. I'm on the music business side because I'm not a musician. But the bigger grouping within the Institute is musicianship, all kinds of instruments, production, all that. We have a business program, which, when you think about it, logically, music, business. Without the music, there is no business. But when you have music, then there's a business you have to attend to make sure that you can move ahead and be profitable and, everybody can be successful. So I teach 4 classes. I'm not a full-time teacher. I do my own, independent consultants thing. But I like to teach for 2 reasons. One, primarily, I get a chance to give back. I've been very fortunate. And I've got a lot of respect for up-and-coming talent. And if I can give them a few words of wisdom along the way that will help them, then I'm very happy to do that. And at the same time, when you're meeting new students coming in who are, 18, 20, 25, they see things and do things differently from where I grew up, of course. I'm not the most technical person in the world by a long shot. And I don't seek out music in as many ways as most kids do today. They don't listen to radio, most of the kids, my students. Very seldom do they use radio as an area to find music. They, Spotify and Apple Music and, of course, YouTube and, all the other kind of sites and the word of mouth and social media. It's a very different world. So I'm not as up to date on that as maybe I could be or should be. I don't have to be that way to teach on more the basics of, what happens when it's a business after the music is being created. But I learn from them. So I get a great joy out of meeting new students. Some of them, you just wonder why the heck they're there because they don't participate much. And then you get those that have come in and they're hungry and they have a lot of questions and they're involved. And, and you see something. I've seen some kids come through that, are going to do well in the business in some way because they're hungry. We get quite a few international students as well. And they're usually the better students in general because they come a long way to come here and the expense that goes with it to learn. And that they're hungry, much more hungry than a lot of other kids. I find, and it's something we don't want to dwell too much on, that a lot of kids feel they're entitled and they're not. That's not the way life is. You have to go out and you have to work hard, and that's not a bad thing. And in our business, there's no formula because it's a creative business and there are no real rules. So, we talk about this a lot just to give you an overview about our business for anybody that's listening, viewing this, that you have to have something inside you first and foremost, but you more so not as connections, it's relationships, it's meeting people, asking questions. Most people will not give you any doorway to open, but there are times when that will happen. And if you don't do that, you're going to be missing out on opportunities that could be there. So we stress that in the classes, and not just myself, the other teachers on the business side, that it's a big part of our business is relationship driven. And there's ways you can meet people without being a pain in the ass. There are, we have the Recording Academy, which is the music industry's legitimate organization that put on the Grammys every year, at the beginning of the year. Amongst the numerous things that they do, they have an amazing charity called Music Cares, but they also have an entity called Grammy U. It is for students who, while they're a student, for however long they're a student, plus 2 more years after they leave, they can be a member of Grammy U for $50, one-time down payment, $50. It's like, what, $5, 5 cups of coffee? A lot of students don't even take advantage of it, but they get to go to functions, they get to go to sound checks, they get to go to seminars, they get to participate and they get to meet people. And if you're hungry and you're interested and you want to learn, these are the best places to go because you're going to meet people, and the people that are there from the industry are not there being paid. We volunteer. We'd rather give something back to those that are interested. So it is an industry in the music industry. It's mostly, if you're an IT person, if you're an accountant or a human resources, that you have to go for training for that stuff. But if you're creative, you don't. You know, you don't have to have a degree to be an A&R person or a promotion person or a salesperson or a marketing person. Sometimes marketing, but it's about how creative are you? You know, how are you going to go out there and kick butt? You know,
there's also a film and TV industry out there.
Oh, yeah, big one, of course, big, yes, and they're interlinked. Music is a big part of film and television these days, more so than ever. And there's a lot of music used that is created by independent artists. That's available, that's used and licensed. It has to be licensed from, you know, independent artists as well as labels. Yeah, it's a big business. You're not going to get rich unless you get a hit song out of it, but it can give you some income flow. And if you're really good, you get more and more of that because they come back to you and they know that you're professional, you can deliver good stuff. They'll come to you before going to somebody they don't know. And that's exposure. And you can use that for your social media, which is crucial again in our business. Yeah, film and TV is big business, big business.
Yeah, really good. We're talking to Don Grierson here on Be Live TV. Vincent here with you for another 10 minutes. We're having a great talk here with Don. And, you know, it's great how you also like to, you keep very busy in the LA area, and you also like to do a bit of traveling. I thought this was an interesting picture to talk about.
I don't do a lot of that kind of thing, but I'd like it if it's possible. I mean, I don't think I'll be going there, but I'm actually talking to some people through somebody that's based here in the Ukraine. They've got a creative thing they're talking about doing and they want input. And so I'm always, because I've traveled, I've had the great luxury, and, you know, I would never have dreamed this in a million years, but for a period of time when I did promotion for Capital for a number of years, then they had to change upstairs and they changed promotion people. I went to work for another big company called RCA. They had changes of politically upstairs management. And then through one of the guys that I worked with when I was at Capital, who was a salesman, had moved up the ladder and now became head of international. So when I was no longer at RCA, he said, "Hey, I've got a job over here, you know, doing international." I go, "Well, I'm into that one." So next thing I know, I started in October, and then early December, I'm going to France, to Sweden, and to London with my boss, and they're paying for it.
Fantastic.
I'm going, "Are you kidding me?" At that point, I did for 2.5 years. I traveled a lot of the world, and I love it because I was born in England, grew up in Australia. I do have that travel thing because I came from Australia to here on my own. You know, I'm not afraid of other languages. I don't speak them, but I'm not afraid of different cultures doing business different ways, which most countries have the same basics, but there's a lot of variations. And so later, this photo you're talking about, I went to Norway for a week to work with this young lady and her producer guy. He's in the photo. Yeah, that's him at the back. And, you know, the idea was for her to record and kind of it's like artist development, you know, put all the pieces together and build step by step. And she turned out to be very successful in Norway, but didn't cross the borders, so to speak.
I see.
But I mean, that to me was like a thrill, you know. Or here I am in Norway for a week, all expenses paid. I was like, nice.
You know, Don, we live in a world that you are firmly based in the real world when it comes to the logistics, the hard work, the life skills that come into play. We have some shows on TV. There's some shows on TV. A good question from Rodney here. Do you listen to any of the artists singing on TV reality shows? And you know, interesting. Emma Marie is watching right now from here in Loveland, Colorado, and her friend Darcy just won America's Got Talent. She's the young ventriloquist.
Oh, I saw that. Yes, very clever. Whew.
Absolutely, and has a bright future, I would say, ahead of starting at a very early age. We have artists who are, a bit older that look to these shows sort of as the holy grail, and it's kind of it's a tough situation because even though they have some mentoring that happens there, they're not really learning the business through the shows. So the question from Rodney: do you listen to any of the artists singing on the TV reality shows?
To be honest, generally no, and that's no disrespect to those that are on the show. The shows are very controlled. There's a lot goes on behind the scenes that we don't know about, and how they control everything. They are basically not able to really be who they might really truly be inside themselves. They are directed to sing certain kinds of songs depending on the moment in the show. They control everything. On one hand, it is exposure, and that can be helpful. There's no doubt about it. Getting exposure is a challenge for anybody. If you look at the history of the reality shows, there's very, very few successful artists that come out of it because they're not really unique. You're supposed to fit in, That's not to say some of them aren't talented. There's a lot of them have talent, no question. But, for a while when when American Idol was hot, the RCA was their big label. Everybody that were finalists, or the label wanted the rights to, because they could have the rights to that artist from the show, because you didn't have any say. If you signed for that show, they managed you and they controlled your life, and they tell you this is what you're going to do, and this is where you're going to go, and this is the album you're going to make. And that to me generally does not work. And with rare really, when you think about it, from Kelly Clarkson all the way through, there's been very few artists who've actually come out of American Idol and now The Voice that have actually turned into successful artists outside the show and being attached to the show. So I look at it as, if you want to go that route, then I would not argue with you. I would say be careful, because you're not going to be who you think you are. They're going to tell you a lot about who you're going to be. So there's pro and there's con. I just look at history and say, how many successful artists have come out of it? Certainly some talent. I mean, I've seen some of the stuff from America's Got Talent. Some of these, artists that you just see clips on YouTube, and someone's like, wow. But then you go, what happened? Now, there's many reasons why things don't happen. There's a few reasons why things do happen. That's a very good question. And to answer it, no, I don't watch a lot of that. I do catch up, especially when you go into more the final weeks, when you've consolidated down to, down to who the prime candidates are to be the winner. But no, that's not where I would seek the great artist. I would want somebody that had something about themselves that nobody was controlling, and then help them ideally develop with guidelines, because it is a business. We have to remember it's always a business. Mm-hmm. And there are certain things you do have to do, although there's variation of how you do that. That does apply, no question. But without dwelling on the point, that's not my focus.
Right. And then you have a 12-year-old ventriloquist blow everybody away and run away with the title, which is really, she totally deserved it, but it's kind of interesting how that all can happen.
Yeah, and I mean, that show is very broad in varying types and styles of talent, where Absolutely. The Voice is about music. The new American Idol will be the same as the last one. It's about singers, being judged by, industry people. There's a place for it. We used to have the old talent shows way back, long time ago. And it was like, everybody watched those shows. They still do it. It's not the place. If you're unique, and being successful has a lot to do with how unique you are and different from everybody else. And that's those kind of shows generally, unless you've just got this incredible voice, and no matter what you sing, people go, oh my God, there's only a few of those. they stylize you,
Mm-hmm.
and that to me sometimes can work against you.
And once again, it all begins with the music. That is so true.
It is. I mean, when we came up with the title of the book, it was like, it all begins with the music. It said that, you know what? It does. Because without the music, there is no business.
Mm-hmm.
Real simple. It's not that we were overly smart. It was just like, that makes a lot of sense. It all begins. It's the music business. Music business.
Music business. And this is Don's website, dongrierson.com, and you can order the book on Don's website. It's also available on Kindle, which is the way that I have it. And Don, it's been really a thrill to have you on this live show. I know we'll be continuing to speak, and we're hoping to have you out in Fort Collins in March. We've talked about that.
Get ready. If I come out, I'm going to mess you guys up.
Be this whirlwind and say, what happened? So thanks very much. And I want to thank everybody for watching. This is, what do you think of this new technology with the Be Live, Don? This is a new thing. This
is technology. It changes every day. I'm always impressed with the fact that these things happen and how they happen. Streaming, 5 years ago, people were streaming. Now it's like key to our business. These kind of things are great because you're being creative, and you're sitting in Colorado being creative. You couldn't do that a few years ago.
No.
These things are great. I have the utmost respect. If they run well and somebody's handling a show like you do, and it's, has a place for it, absolutely. Yeah. And the audience is out there. They seek out good creative things, and they don't just listen to the old school saying, this is the way you got to do it. And no, those days are way back, way gone. So I think these things are great. I think it's all part of the world we live in, and we have to adapt. And some amazing things have come out of this new world of technology that we live with. Mm-hmm. I can't spell the word, but I respect it.
Well, Don, I really want to thank you for being with us.
My pleasure.
And it'd be wonderful if we can have you on again in the future. And
anytime.
It all begins with the music. I really urge people to check this book out. Just an incredible, fascinating information, and a great guy in the music business, the legendary Don Grierson. Thanks, Don.
My pleasure.
Thanks, everybody, for watching as well.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. Okay.